Morgan had her first boy ask her.
I heard.
She made the smart choices.
Should get you a country song. I think you really appreciate it. About the dad in the yard and in the lawn chair, what he's doing.
Her best friend. Her father both had a t-shirt. My dad had one, an alibi, and something on there.
Only in my house, it's me.
Talked to you in like forever. I haven't talked to you in like forever. I wanted to. I am on you are on my list, but I
He
want
really
to.
likes that class. He really is.
That's a nice thing about convention.
He likes to think he likes the
We can
combination.
chat. We'll chat. Okay.
That's what he
Margaret called me
Yeah.
after she talked to
You're
you.
not too sure
All right,
about
but you already talked to her.
No,
So.
like I took Colt late last year. And
On behalf of the Shenendehowa Central School District, I'd like to call the meeting to order and start off with our Pledge of Allegiance. Please turn to the flag behind me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The only announcement we have is I'd like to point out the exits to the front and the back in case there's an emergency. And now let's move towards adopting an agenda. Can I have a motion? Mrs. Blaber, Mr. Casey, all in favor? Okay. And I'd like to point out that this is a study session. It's designed for the purpose of having administrative updates to the Board of Education. There are no public comments at our study session meetings. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting on November 8th and or contact the board by email at boe@shenet.org with any comments or questions. All questions come to the Office of the Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and our superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions, concerns are typically addressed to the board president. Operational questions, concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and our designee. So at this point, we'll turn over to superintendent comments. Go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Before going to the presentations tonight, I just want to share a couple of things. At your table, those members who are attending the school board's convention, you should have a packet with the necessary documents. I'm just being safe. They were emailed to you, but just in case you need a hard copy, you have one, and I also have one too. So we have a third copy, just in case, because Buffalo is a long way to be stranded without appropriate accommodations. The goal is recognizing that we will be traveling separately to try to connect around midday on Thursday and go from there, and then we'll make arrangements otherwise once we reach Buffalo for the school board's convention. So looking forward to that. Mrs. Blaber, you'll be certainly missed this year.
the designated survivor, right?
And one just other quick announcement. I won't go into too much, and I'm sure that at some point in the future, probably not today, since we don't have board comments per se, but I was privileged to attend a forum sponsored by the Capital Region BOCES. It was one of, I think, 34, 36 such forums across the state of New York this past week by the State Education Department to look at the Every Student Succeed Act. That's the new Federal Education Act, and how the New York State Education Department will be addressing certain requirements from the Federal Education Department. I know Mr. Delalo was in attendance. We also had several parents in attendance. We also had a student in attendance, several teachers, and administrators. So I walked in the room and I thought, wow, Shen is really going to control the dialogue here. So it was great that we had a chance to try to hopefully influence the direction of the New York State Education Department in terms of some of these new regulations. So more to come on that. And I'll send out probably next Friday a copy of the report. In fact, I'm probably just sending an email to you tomorrow, a copy of the report that came from that, so you can see some of the things people thought were things that should be a part of the new standard regulations, so to speak, and things that probably should not be. Not saying that any of these things will actually materialize that way, but at least these were the opinions from this region. So I want to share that with you as well. And again, last thing I want to point out at your tables, this is School Board Recognition Week. And every year as a school district, we like to take the time, and I'd like to do so now, to take the time on behalf of the entire school community, not only the employees, students of Shen, but also the entire community, to say thank you very much, board members, for your tremendous time, commitment, and sacrifice. You know the time that you put in, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't. People only think it's only time you spend all the time here at the meetings. Recognize this. The meeting is actually the fun part in some instances because there's a lot of work that's being done at committees, many nights out at events and different liaison responsibilities. So I really want to stop and say thank you very much for your tremendous service. This school district is great because we do have great people on the Board of Education. And as I look around, I see some of the people who have been here my entire time here. So I really appreciate that support as well. So just a little small token of our appreciation from the entire school community to say thank you very much. So thank you. I want me to go ahead into the presentation.
Go right ahead, please.
So we have a couple presentations tonight that we planned as a part of our ongoing study sessions. Over the course of the year, the board has a calendar, so to speak, for every study session every month, and we try to provide information on either relevant updates for district goals or in some case topics of interest. And one of the topics of interest we'll address tonight is the topic pertaining to the veterans tax exemption. The purpose of tonight is to simply give the board and the public that's listening an overview. It's not necessarily a session designed to garner action on behalf of the board, just to provide an overview at this time. Three pieces that I'll address in this particular survey: a Q&A document that I created as a result of, honestly, I wanted to understand the topic myself. So completed extensive research to understand the topic. What does the law entail? What are different places doing? Things of that nature. So create a Q&A document. I'm going to walk through that document in a second. The second piece that I'll just go is we created a presentation, a one-pager. Again, a simple grasp of the main components of the Q&A document. And then the third piece is a sample survey. Many communities utilize surveys to get the feedback of the larger community on this particular topic. So I'll just quickly at the end walk through those survey topics as well. Not necessarily suggesting the survey, but just show you this is one resource that many schools have used in the past. So Mrs. Slaver, sorry for it. So I'm just going to open this first document, the presentation document itself, and go from that document a little bit. Guess we're too big here. Okay, so it's probably smaller, but at least it fits the screen. Four pieces that I want to highlight in this piece of it is, one, the benefits of the alternative veterans exemption. What's the impact on the school district, and how does this play out by the numbers, so to speak, and then what different towns and the makeup the school district have been doing. But let me kind of go backwards a little bit again. I have to apologize because I can't see the top of that screen of it. So I feel like I'm playing Vanna White for myself here. Okay, Callie, you may have to help me here. So while Kelly just go back to our home screen, I'm just going to go to our Q&A document. The board has a copy of the Q&A document, and this document is also on the link for people who are in the audience who want to have access to it. They can always access all three of these documents that are posted on the website. So the first question that I asked was trying to find out, what is alternate veteran exemption? And for the board's purposes, this law was enacted in 1984 for municipalities. And at that point, clearly, municipalities started acting on it in In 2013, the governor extended that to school districts. So it's relatively new to school districts in terms of this particular law. Next question is who is eligible? There are several criteria. One of being an honorable discharge service veteran, someone active duty during the wartime, and it's very specific wars: Persian Gulf veteran, Vietnam veteran, Korean veteran, World War II. Also talks about veterans receiving expeditionary medals who qualify under certain war periods. So there's very clear distinction for qualifications. So I say that because it's not just any veteran. There are very specific veterans that impact this piece of it. One of the pieces that I thought was kind of interesting was the fact that National Guard service is not considered as an active duty piece, because that was an interesting piece, because that's seems like we have a lot of people participating in National Guard service. So what are the benefits of that? So Cal, so one of the things they're talking about, and the benefits talking about this, the exemption provide a combination of reductions from a 15% reductions assessed for a veteran who served during a wartime, a 25% reduction for those for again assessed evaluation for veterans serving in the combat zone, and up to a 50% exemption assessed for veterans who incur service-connected disabilities. And the key part of this is it's the up to, and so it's a formula that drives the calculation of that piece of it. So again, it's a combination of three different things. The exemption applies to there are different levels of exemptions. And the exemptions go from level A, which they call the basic exemption, to as high as level N, as in Nancy. So just give you an example. For a wartime combat, a level A exemption is $12,000 off the assessed valuation. In comparison to a level N for that same category is $45,000. For a combat zone, that 25% is $8,000 exemption for level A, and for level N is $30,000, and for disability on the level A is $40,000, on the level N is $150,000. I just show you this, wanted to illustrate the bookends, if you will. Can you make that smaller, Cal, to the whole screen? So to highlight the point that there are different benefits that goes with this piece of it. So what has happened over the course of the town of Clifton, let me back up for a second. The town of Half Moon, Waterford, and Stillwater all opted into level A, the basic exemption. The town of Clifton Park, Boston, and Malta, as well as Saratoga County, opted into level K. So level K is almost in the middle of the range in terms of the dollar numbers. Again, I want to illustrate that point because different municipalities can, in fact, adopt different ranges. However, as a school district, we're made up of 6 different municipalities. We can only adopt one that applies across the board. So in other words, we won't adopt one for residents in Half Moon, one for residents in Malta. It's a single one that we adopt to. And so the examples I'm going to show you today is based upon the county of Saratoga County that adopted a level K. And the reason why that's important, because all the information we get in terms of who's eligible comes from the Saratoga County. So it makes sense for us to look at the information they have, because they've already collected the data county-wise in terms of the number of parcels who's eligible. So looking at by the numbers, for example, right now in the Shen School District, we have 22,767 taxable parcels within the entire Shen School District. Of those 22,000 taxable parcels, 2,242 are potentially eligible if we were to adopt this veteran exemption. That's about 9.4% of the eligible parcels. Good.
How do they get the 2,242? What's the mechanism to recognize that is a potential? This came from the county. The county goes through, there's an application process and then a verification process. Okay. And the county actually adopted this. So this is based upon 2015 data, by the way. So this is after they've gone through, vetted those applications, and deemed those parcels within the Shen district to be eligible. Does that answer your question?
In those towns, right?
No, this is just across. This is
county,
all
right? All of the county.
all
Well, no, within the Shen district.
Okay,
So
that's
the
what I
22,000
mean.
parcels within the Shen school district. Of those 22,000, about 2,200 of them are potentially eligible.
According to Saratoga County.
According to Saratoga County, that's correct.
And to be clear, we're not making the determination of who's eligible and who's
no,
not. We're
no.
just taking the information that was given to us.
That's correct, and that's what we would do. We wouldn't make the application process. We go through the county, and the county would provide that listing of eligible parcels.
Are these exclusively residents, primary residents, or is it in all parcels?
Well, no, this only applies to the residents of eligible individuals. Does that make sense?
There are 22,000 resident parcels, not
That's correct.
non-business.
That's correct. So that's one thing to point out. And just to give you a sense of what it actually translates to, a couple of things that this law does. This law doesn't change the total amount of taxes we collect as a school district. What it does is shift the burden in terms of who is paying for a portion of that. And that's one piece I wanted to point out, because there were some mixed information in terms of people confusing this with STAR and some other exemptions. Has nothing to do with those other exemptions, or the recent tax cap plan exemption where people get a bonus check at home, so to speak, has nothing to do with those things. So I want to point it out and just give an example of that. So at the level K again, in the level K, it was easier for us to do a simulation because we're just using the county's data and the county assessed valuation. The reason why I said it, because all our tax rolls or assessed valuation, ultimately when people don't pay their taxes, they go to the county, and the county does so everything is verified through the county on the back end anyway, so it's easier for us to have some audited information, so to speak, to do the calculation on. So based upon the notion of a level K exemption, it's a shift in the tax burden of about $1.6 million. So what does that translate to? So for a non-eligible properties, in other words, someone who's not getting this alternative veteran exemption, for a non-eligible property, assess that, and we use, for budget purposes, when we do try to give people some sense of what's the tax impact of our budget, we use a $250,000 assessed valuation mark, and that's about average within the Shen school district, recognizing we obviously have some higher and some lower, but that $250,000 really captures the essence of the average property within the Shen district. And so looking at a $250,000 property, that's about a 1.4% increase in whomever those individual taxes would be, on average about $62 for taxpayers. So that's the if you want to say the socialization or redistribution, if you will, of that particular impact if the level K exemption were to be adopted. Let me pause there, see if there are questions about that.
Well, since all of our properties are not assessed at full value, and we express our tax rate in terms of per thousand, some of the per thousand deductions that we're talking about, since it is expressed as a per thousand deduction, would be worth more to the veteran in some areas and cost the residents of those districts and of those areas more than it would generally.
So yeah, the distribution will obviously vary by communities, by equalization rate, and yeah, absolutely. And so this calculation is again ideal if everyone was the same, and we are just applying this for a house at $250,000 just to kind of get a gauge of what probably best say the average impact would be. Is probably a better word. So, but when we think about impact within Shen, while we have places like Boston, the town of Boston, that often do reevaluations, and the equalization rate is actually more like 100% versus Clifton Park, and we haven't had a re-evaluation in Clifton Park, and that's probably fluctuate more like 50 to 60%. There's some variation, and the equalization rate is designed just to do that, to try to buffer the variations from towns. And so will there be a different impact for a person that lives someplace else? Yes, in the same way that there's a different impact based upon the value of the property that you own as well. So there's a variant impact. And so, but this just to give the board an indication of what we see as the average impact would be. But that makes sense. Mr. Stevenson.
Dr. Robinson, so I just want to be clear. So the town exemptions, we're talking through Saratoga County. Saratoga County, including Half Moon and Waterford and Stillwater, that when we look at this 22,000, we're Saratoga County.
No, 22,000. So when we look at all the parcels within the Shen district.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Of those 22,000 parcels of property within the Shen district, taxable parcels, 2,000 of those are potentially eligible.
Okay, and we don't pick and choose I mean, this is the number we would be working with,
Yeah, I
correct?
mean, yeah, we wouldn't pick and choose. And
Right,
that's-
do
and
not
that's-
cherry pick,
yeah.
okay.
And
got it.
I mean, again, that's an important point to emphasize, because when several school districts that, again, looking at the research that tried to implement this law, there was a misinterpretation, if you will. So they started saying, well, for town X, we want to do a level K. For town Y, we want to do a level B. For town, and all of a sudden, there was a recalibration to say, no, that was not the intent of the law for schools. Because most school districts, or should I say many school districts, are made up of multiple towns. And so the law says that you only adopt one level that applies to all the towns regardless. So the parcels become irrelevant where the parcels are located. It's the valuation of the parcel and the equalization rate in terms of the application to the tax rate itself. That's the only thing that impacts the difference between towns, not necessarily. And so for instance, the town of Half Moon, Waterford, and Stillwater, they adopted a level A. That's irrelevant to us. That's for town-related taxes. And as you know, sometimes people say the town adopted this, but the reality of it is it has no impact if the town is not assessing property taxes. So sometimes it's kind of a misnomer. And so it's one of those things we have to find out too, that sometimes it's adopted on a political basis and not necessarily on a practical basis. And that's the reason why I want to show you by the numbers, practically what it means for us by the numbers, so to speak. And so a couple of things that I want to point out here is that up to the top, that it does in fact treat all as one, all towns as a single entity, not necessarily separate towns. Again, no impact on the total taxes that we collect. It's the redistribution of who actually pays, so to speak. And the last piece, the shifting the tax burden to non-eligible taxpayers. So that's the crux of the impact on us. The Q&A document went into other things, such as, again, the description of the types of veteran, the process for eligibility, but we wouldn't go into that. We would actually rely more on Saratoga County, who has a county-wide eligibility process to identify those parcels or should I say, those individuals who are owners of parcels that are eligible for this particular exemptions.
So in the event if we were to do something with this down the road, and there was a dispute, somebody saying they should be eligible or not, we don't get involved in that. That's through them and the county.
Well, to some degree, we probably would, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our taxing process is as valid as it could or should be. And so we probably would make sure that the vetting is correct. And typically when a dispute happens is when someone who thinks they're supposed to be eligible is not eligible, and then becomes a burden of proof at that point with that individual, with us, and with the county, because if the county may have. So we would, because at the end of the day, it's our levying of taxes, and then the distribution on taxpayers is still our responsibility, not necessarily the county's responsibility. The county only impacts our taxes after the tax date, and people don't pay taxes. It goes to the county to then decide will it be a foreclosure on the property at some point, things of that nature.
But at the beginning of the day, the application isn't made to the district, it's made to the county.
So that's an interesting piece, and that's one of those things first of all, let me kind of talk about that. The process begins that the board must adopt the exemption by vote no later than March 1st of any given year for exemption to be applicable the following year. That's one thing. A couple of things that also unique to that is that it requires two different resolutions if the board decides to do something other than the basic. So I mentioned over here the levels A through N. So the first resolution we're basically saying that, okay, the board wants to adopt this exemption at the basic level. So that's what the law says. And then the law also says, which is kind of quirkiness in the law, I'm not sure why they wrote it that way, but I'm sure there was some rationale somewhere, that if the board then decide to say, well, we want to go to another level other than A, the board has to pass another resolution. Something to be mindful of. In between each resolution, or should I say prior to each resolution, is a public hearing. And so, in other words, on the agenda, on the board agenda, we can't have resolution 1, resolution 2, and adopt both of those things. It has to be a public hearing before resolution 1, and then a public hearing before resolution 2. The piece that I kind of debated with our attorney a little bit to say, okay, so when we think about board meetings, and we have a business meeting probably every 3 weeks, depending on how things fall out, or maybe even 4 weeks, depends on how things fall out on the calendar. Do we technically have to have resolution 1 on business meeting A and resolution 2 on business meeting B? And the comment was, okay, not necessarily. However, if you decide to do it on one night, you literally have to have a public hearing, resolution, stop that meeting, have a public hearing, resolution. So the law speaks to separate public hearings, not necessarily even separate nights, so to speak. So I thought it was kind of a quirky thing about the law. So that's the first piece of the process. And beyond that point, we would then start engaging the county and the Veterans Administration and all different parties to make sure that we do have an accurate count of people who are eligible for this particular piece of it and follow the process beyond that piece of it. Third piece that I want to share real quick here with the board, because I thought it was an interesting thing that several school districts utilize the questions here. And I modified just for Shen purposes because we're Shen, so I didn't want to put up some other school districts' name. But I want to give credit to a lot of the questions are very common with several school districts, not only within this region, but quite frankly, across the state. And it was interesting that, so this is just an intro piece of it. Just want to highlight some of the questions that they ask. And if we were to do something like this, one of the things that we would do is quite frankly, we would link the Q&A document, so because not most people are unfamiliar with this, and so we want to make sure people are familiar with it, so there's a Q&A document to look at. And we also then probably link the summary presentation, just, again, recognize that sometimes people don't want to read 4 pages. They may just want to grab it in 1 page, and so we try to make it as convenient as possible. So we would link something like that to a survey. And so the survey will ask some very basic, what we call demographic questions. Are you a resident of the school district? Are you, in fact, eligible to receive this exemption? Because we want to differentiate between non-eligible residents and eligible residents, so to speak, as we try to analyze and do the analytics on the survey. And so that's one part of it. And then a question, would you like to see the district offer this? And so at that point, we'll be able to know, okay, what's the opinion of non-eligible and what's the opinion of eligibles on this particular question. Another piece that goes on, pretty basic survey. If you want the school district to offer it, explain why. You know, and then it gives the option as an eligible veteran, it would be provided tax saving to me. I feel it's the right thing to do. I feel the impact of non-filing taxpayers is acceptable. So it's more of it's not necessarily, it's truly just trying to gain people's perspective on this particular thing than other. And then there's always other section that people could write in for other. And if you want the school district to offer the exemption, what exemption range would you support? And that's why the Q&A document is important, because within the Q&A document are the exemption range as well, so people can have some sense of what that actually translates to, those exemption range. And if you do not, then ask some of the questions again. It's not a financial position to shift to the taxpayer. It's not appropriate to shift to those kind of things. And do you have any other questions or comments? So a pretty simple survey, but yet would give us some good feedback in terms of where people's perspective are on this piece of it. And again, it would only serve as additional information. I say that because we don't do surveys. Let me back up. We don't make decisions based upon a popular vote, so to speak. We make this is just a way to garner survey, garner information to see where the community, the public is in terms of understanding awareness and respective feedback. And so this was a tool that's used by, have been used by, in fact, many school districts I've noticed. And so I would imagine that we would, if we were to go down this road, we would do something similar to this again. So one, I think it's an awareness piece, as well as an information vehicle to garner information as well. So let me stop there if you have any additional questions.
Dr. Robinson, you referenced that, we got a lot of these questions from school districts that have done these surveys. Do we know how many school districts in our region have actually adopted the exemption?
I don't know the exact amount, but I can tell you that it's more of the minority than majority of school districts, but I don't know the exact number of school districts that have garnered this, have done this. Because a lot of school districts are kind of like where we are now, doing the fact-finding information type thing. So remember, this law was, schools were allowed to apply this exemption in 2013. And so when you think about the sequence of things, it hasn't been a really long time. And that's part of the reason, and again, just back to your question, that's a part of the reason why, if you recall as a board, I put this on our schedule back in August, because this was a conversation. We actually had this conversation for the board members joined here back in 2013 when this law first came out. And at that point, the New York State School Boards Association did a pretty extensive survey across the state. And at that point, maybe it's because it was so new, the large majority of schools hadn't done anything with it at that point. So, but that was, again, back in, I think it was 2013, 2014 when we did that piece of it. And so it was a kind of appropriate timing for us to look at it again, to see what's happening across the state, and also to share information with you as a board, so you can have I would call a fairly good understanding of it. The website for where the law is located is linked on here, and my intent was not to regurgitate the law to you, but to put it in the Q&A format so it's easy to understand.
If we were to actually consider this, I would definitely want to do something with the survey. This is very unique in the sense that most of the decisions, virtually all the decisions we make, have an educational impact. This has nothing to do with education per se, just a source of revenue. And so we're talking about how the decision would impact citizen group A as opposed to citizen group B. And to do that, I would really like to know how those affected citizen groups would feel about it.
Yeah, and good point, Mr. Delato, and that's the reason why even for the board, I use the example, just so people can have some sense of what this actually could translate, because that's always a thing. I mean, you can read words, but the question that we get all the time, budget time, what does that mean for me and my taxes and my tax bill? And as much as we can try to simulate that, if you will, we would want to do that so people have some sense of the impact, because some people probably think it's a lot, some people probably think it's a little, but we want to give some sense of what's the average, if you will, impact on the average taxpayer, if there's such thing as an average taxpayer.
Is it possible for us to go further than that so that the various towns would know if there's a distinction between one and another, and whether they're getting more of a benefit and carrying more burden versus another one?
We can, and I'm saying now, I probably shouldn't say without actually, Mrs. Wetmore did a lot of analysis, but if you guys have seen Mrs. Wetmore's spreadsheets before, they're so tiny, and I'm not even going to attempt to sit here and try to and I say that because we didn't want to go too far down the road and, quite frankly, spend so much time on running after what if at this point versus to give you just a flavor. But it's clear that if this is something adopted, we have to go to the nth degree, to every property, and see how this applies to every property within the respective municipalities.
Would the general impact on the town level be available to the residents when they were taking a survey?
So let me just look at something here for a quick second. When we look at I would say with the impact is probably going to be similar and will vary more so by the value of the property than the actual location of the property.
The assessed value?
The assessed value of the property, I'm sorry, yes. Because because even when we look at our school taxes, a house, because of the equalization rate factor, a $250,000 house in Clifton Park and we typically use Clifton Park and Half Moon, because Clifton Park and Half Moon represents probably 90% or more of our assessed valuation. So when we look at two properties located in those two communities, the equalization rate almost make those two property tax impact very comparable. But what you have is a likelihood of a house at $250,000 in one community versus another community. That's where the difference is actually sometimes comes in at. And I say that, but it could vary significantly though if equalization rates are really out of whack, and we don't determine equalization rates. Every year in July, as you guys know, we wait for the Office of Real Property Services to send us equalization rates, and we cross our fingers because we know what the true value, when I say true value, when we look at all the taxable parcels within the Shen district, all the municipalities, we come up with what we call a true value tax rate. We know what that is, but the equalization rate can skew, if you will, for individual towns based upon certain factors. And so that could have some impact on, and those are the kind of things that we obviously would have to go into a lot of detail and discussions with. And we would do that at the same time that we're doing all the other tax calculations in January, July, August for the board to adopt the warrant in August for tax bills for September and October.
So when we're looking at the towns that are in our district, this is sort of like a cost-leveling process. And in other words, non-veterans are paying more, veterans are seeing a reduction in their taxes. Is it all integral? Does it all combine all of the Shen taxpayers?
Yeah, so
it doesn't compartmentize like the...
No.
Okay.
No. So that's a good question. So the distribution will be a distribution across and that's the reason why we use this piece here. That's the reason why we use the 22,000 versus the 2 to say if we were to distribute this $1.6 million across all the properties within the school district, that's the impact of distributing across all. And the reason why I say that, because now, otherwise it would be an unfair burden. So let me back up. The reason why the law says there's a single school is because you don't want to, out of politics, create an undue burden on the community. Hey, I like this community, so we're going to have the lower exemption, so their impact isn't as great as this community we don't like, we're going to have a greater impact. And so what I try to do is take the politics, I use the word like to substitute for politics. It takes the politics out of the decision, so to speak. In the same way, the distribution takes the unfairness of where people happen to live out of the equation and create a socialization across all potential taxpayers to carry the burden, if you will. So in other words, if Boston happened to be a mecca for veterans, only the residents in Boston aren't necessarily carrying all the burden for all the residents. It's distributed across all the taxpayers within the Shen taxing jurisdiction. I mean, does that answer?
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
Okay.
And also veterans that are not homeowners, let's say they rent a property.
It's a people property. You have to be the property.
Okay, so they would not be
That's correct.
impacted by this.
That's correct.
Okay.
So neither would apartment dwellers.
Now, I mean, if you're not paying property tax as a property owner, there's no benefit to be gained
Okay.
Or additional burden.
or additional burden. You could potentially get no additional burden.
I have a few questions. Just to be clear, other exemptions have a state reimbursement, such as STAR, yes?
Yes.
So, and this is not, for whatever reason, on the horizon at this time, but suppose the state decided that they were going to reimburse, and suppose Shen implemented a tax exemption, then what would happen? Would it just be sort of relief to the socialized taxpayers?
You know, and that's
Okay.
if I was clairvoyant that way, Mrs. Faber, I would on an island in Tahiti right now. And I don't know that. And one of the things that's clearly stipulated that, and the STAR is one of the big exemptions, that there's no reimbursement for the school for this particular alternative, and as like the STAR reimbursement. And so that's one of the things that again, looking at a lot of the research, when this came, it was a municipality piece for a long time. And when it was adopted for schools, there was an assumption that this is, and then people realized, no, it's a redistribution, and not necessarily like STAR, where there's an exemption that's provided and taxpayers get that difference back, directly back from as a STAR payment. So this is not that at all. Nor does this impact other exemptions that people may have. So somebody may have some other, because we have a disability and a senior exemption. So if you have those, this doesn't impact that. These things are very much isolated from each other. So you could be eligible for multiple, if you will, exemptions.
So, do you know, in the communities that have adopted this and have had it in place for a year, in the second year, when people pay their sort of increased taxes, and the school and went through another budget cycle, what happened to the opinion or the approval rate or?
No, I haven't seen any information on that. I've spoken to a couple of colleagues who actually this year will be their second year going into it, and so I don't know that. And again, I think that it becomes an issue, quite frankly, with you of what's the tax. I think people make it an issue if it becomes a noticeable, financially noticeable issue. In other words, if we were to say, this is your tax bill without the exemption, and this is your tax bill with the exemption applied. Not necessarily saying that, because the statute doesn't necessarily even speak that we have to make that kind of distinction. I think that's when people may wonder, okay, wow, I'm paying X dollars more now that I probably wouldn't have had to pay. And that's why this conversation is important, and that's why schools have done this type of survey, because as Mr. DeLallo pointed out, this isn't a decision that the board is making to say we're levying taxes because we want to support programs. This is a decision to basically say we want to provide a relief to a particular segment of the taxpaying population, and so the surveys try to get some sense of what's the general feel, because clearly if you're someone who could potentially benefit for this, I'm sure you'd say, okay, this is a potential benefit, why should I say no? So I think that's why those surveys are being used in advance, and people trying to really get a handle on what's the public sentiment on this. In fact, one school district did the survey multiple times, because one of the things that they were hearing is that people are like, well, we don't know anything about this. And so it became almost like a educational campaign by the school district to inform people. And then there's a fine line between when you're informing people of the pros and cons of what may sound like propaganda either way, for or against, and so that's stuff. So it becomes a very tricky piece. And so I say that because depending on where we want to go, and again, I'm not asking the board to say yay and nay to anything tonight. That wasn't the intent of the conversation. But if we decide to proceed this further, this will be something that we'll be very thoughtful about how we do it to ensure that we're being as objective as possible, and getting information in a very objective way, and not trying to bias the conversation either way versus these are the facts of the matter, and based upon these facts, what are your opinion?
I would think that the survey distribution would be critically important,
Yeah.
that it
See how
cannot
it pans
just
out,
be,
yeah.
Of course, eligible veterans would be very interested in completing the survey, but we would also need to make sure that other people who would be bearing the responsibility, the financial responsibility, would have equal access.
Yeah, and that's
to a
what
survey.
some places saw. They saw that the return was, quite frankly, poor and somewhat one-sided. So was it really a gauge to understand? And people felt it didn't, so they did it again.
All of this information to me has been really important and detailed, and I just am grateful. We had this conversation before, as you said, but not to this level, and I'm very grateful to have it now, and I appreciate all the work that went into doing that, and thank you, Kathy, for the teeny tiny print. It's all good.
So good, Mr. Preston.
How much of it is a burden on the actual tax collection process? So, for example, all these things have been done by other districts. Did they say it was, once they figured it out or cracked the code, it was?
Once the mathematical formula is laid out, it's a calculation. And so the reason why I say it, because we have, every year, we have the senior exemption piece of it, which is actually I think at a basic level of that exemption category. So it's a calculation. I mean, once we put into the queue, so to speak, it calculated out, and the tax bills will be funded accordingly. The piece, though, that we always have to be mindful of, and that's a piece that I have to understand a little bit better, and back to what I alluded to with Mrs. Blaber, is when we, for budget purposes, are talking about here's the tax impact, and we say, for instance, that the tax impact on average person is X, 1%, and then someone, after we go and apply the exemption piece of it, and people get them back, and their tax impact is 2.4%. Where does that come in at? So I'm thinking that part of what we may actually have to do is talk about what are the implications, not necessarily what's the specific implication of people, but kind of like this, the average impact is X. So it's very fair information, because what we can't do as a system is having people thinking that we're misleading by giving misinformation to the potential taxpayers, eligible or non-eligible taxpayers.
I think you mentioned a date sometime in March when,
By March 1st, by statute, this has to be adopted, meaning Resolution 1 and or Resolution 2, prior to March 1st to be effective the following tax year.
it have to be revisited annually, or is that until such time as you say?
I think no, once we adopt it, just a one-time adoption. It's only time it would have to be revisited if we decide to change the exemption level. So that's why they have the two. The first one is just the basic, and then anytime you want to change after that, you have to do another hearing, another resolution.
Do we have enough time at this?
I mean, it's
if we're
something.
gonna
Yeah, I
move
mean,
forward?
that's part of the reason we also we do have, from a time perspective, as we sit here end of October.
So what's the downside to just doing the survey? Is there a discussion that needs to be, or can we just say, let's move forward with the survey now in order to preserve the time frame and start that process? Or do we need to have a formal adoption process?
No. The survey, I would suggest that before the board contemplate adoption, you do the survey, because you want to get some sense of, is there something you really
But
want to do?
what I mean is, do we need to talk about this again, or can we today say, let's move forward with a survey? I don't understand that whole process.
No, I mean, it's not, the survey is not a formal action by the board.
Okay.
And quite frank with you, I could have did a survey a month ago, just for time purposes or whatever, and could have been coming back and say, board, by the way, here's information. But the reason why I didn't want to do that, because obviously you don't want to put something out there that as a body you haven't even discussed and quite frank with you, digested enough to say, is this something that you want to do or not do? So I would suggest that we bring this conversation back again at the November 11th meeting, and 8th meeting, I'm sorry. And then at that point, working with Mrs. DeFisciani, we'll probably do some fine tuning on the survey. I know we will, because this was my version, and she has much better survey ability than I. And see if there's something you want to do. And at that point, I'll lay out a timeline to say, if we do this, for how long, in order to do this, in order to do this, so the board could have a clear timeline in terms of what this potentially means. So sound to me that's, I'm looking at facial expression and nods, that I'll do something for the November 8th meeting, having a survey instrument ready, as well as having a timeline of how long we have the survey out there for, and that timeline will dictate by other actions and timeframes. Does that make sense?
So we are preserving our options and giving ourselves an opportunity to make an informed choice. We're not telegraphing or with any intention or design saying, this is going to happen.
I agree,
don't want
Mr.
to send
Dillon.
that message out.
No, and no, that's a very valid point, and I just want to emphasize for the purpose, and even having this conversation is basically said that the board wants to have a fair deliberation about this. You will share this information for the public, because sometimes the public think that the only first time the board is seeing the information. You will share this information in your packet, had enough time to look at it, and so this is more of a public discussion than anything else, and you'll continue to have that, and I would also encourage that even after tonight, if there are questions you have, send the questions to me, and I'll try to have answers and send them back out to the whole body as an information piece of it, not necessarily as a discussion piece, because we don't have virtual meetings. So as a discussion piece, again, with the notion that on the 8th, I'll come back with a more defined time frame so you can see actually what that means. But I didn't want to take that step, to be quite frank with you, before taking this first step.
I just had one suggestion as it relates to the survey. I think the difficulty of this, one of the difficulties is, this is like the old Howard Johnson's, there's too many flavors here in terms of A to N, you know?
So
But-
can I say something before you do that? Let me
Yes.
go out on a limb before you do that. If we were to do something, I would suggest that we go with what the county use, because the county is the county. And two, we would have to gather that same data. So the county, this level K is what the county use across the board. And I just say that because there's no mathematical piece to it, other than from a purely practical perspective. That would be the method that, in terms of, because again, of how tax data translate from the Saratoga County to us. We don't get tax data from towns, we get evaluation data from towns. So that's, I'm not sure if that's where you're going, but
Well, only that, you had some ranges up there in the survey that, would you go with A to C or something like that? Yeah. So the ranges, if my math is correct, if we went with the basic versus the number you had, it would be 1/3 the impact.
potentially.
But, so I'm just saying, as it relates to the survey, when you lay out the ranges, I think we ought to have a number impact, as close as we can, for each.
So
range.
here's the difficulty with that. You think mathematically it'd be that simple, but the reality of it is, it's not necessarily 15% or 20% of that. That changes. So the range has a dollar amount. So let me give you an example. So range A, for example, has a dollar amount of 12,000 or 15%. That 15% may not be 12,000. Depends on the value of your property.
Okay.
Or your property could be so valuable that the most you can get is 12,000. So that's the trick in the calculation. And so it's funny, Mrs. Wetmore and I, we were trying to think of a nice, easy way to do exactly that for the board, and we realized that literally we have to go through all 2,000 individual parcels. And that's the reason why I said we had no desire to spend hours and hours and hours for what's best as a simulation at this point. Because it's not as simple as that, and we saw it very quickly. We started kind of going through that little exercise and realized, oh my God, it's very, very based upon every other parcel on the value of those parcels. And so back to Mr. DeLallo's point, so I could have a house, whatever, $1 million house, I'm a veteran, and my 15% is way higher than your $100,000 house at 15%. But everyone is capped if we do this max at 12, but you might be getting something less than the 12. And so it's not just a pure 15% of it. Does that make sense?
It does.
And so that's what made trying to do all those what ifs so difficult. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we'll transition here and go from serious to fun. Not that summer isn't serious. As Dr. Wood comes forward with several individuals, as you know, the school campus is just as alive in the summertime as it is otherwise. We have multiple programs from summer school to camps for students, and each year we like to do this because this is the other dimension. I call it the extra shift, if you will, that sometimes people don't think about. People think school is done in June, But the reality is, we have many, many kids who are here engaged in activities over the course of the summer. Some more of what I call the educational fun activities, and some of it because, quite frankly, kids absolutely need it from a pure academic credential piece of it. So we try to provide this overview for the board and for the public because this is, we think it's a tremendous positive investment of resources to provide these options and opportunities. And you heard Dr. Wood's going to talk about some of the new things that we tried this year or started this year from last year's budget, things that we know that's going to grow more as we do more of it. So I'll turn it over to her.
Great. So we start off by talking about our summer literacy support program, which also has under the umbrella what's on that next slide, which is the English as a New Language program. This year we had just under 200 students participating in just the AIS portion of the summer literacy support program, which was at Scano Elementary, Tasago. Boy, the years start running together after a while. Scano, quite sure. Unless it was last year. Anyway, I should have written that down. And as you're well aware, Scott D'Ambro has been coordinating the program for many years, and I certainly want to highlight his contributions for keeping it a very positive place for students and staff in the summer. And also I want to highlight the work of Amy Drages, who is the glue that holds that entire program together. When you have young children coming in just for 16 days of instruction, they make sure that it is a well-oiled machine and students are ready to hit the ground running. This really does focus on students who benefit from additional supports based on the services that they received during the school year. I will say that one enhancement to this program over this last summer was greater reporting to parents about progress and specific work done to benefit their students in the summer. And that was something that we had gotten in terms of feedback. Parents wanted more, and so a lot of credit to the staff and Scott for really working through a way to meaningfully give some information after only 16 half days. Very positive feedback from parents, as always. In terms of the ENL Summer Support Program, Adam Sweet and Rachel Stead led the coordination efforts, and it really provides an opportunity for students who may otherwise go almost 3 months with not a lot of English support, the opportunity to come in and continue to develop their English skills as they continue to try to access content. And as they move through the grades, the content load gets pretty significant. Their need for English vocabulary really ramps up. And you'll see we had great participation and certified ENL teachers supporting the work. And Kristen Lennon McMahon took over this summer, actually returned as summer school principal, and she will give highlights of the program.
So thank you for letting me come speak to you tonight. I'm excited to speak to you about summer school. What was unique this year was we actually added programming this year to the summer school. There is a typo up there, and I tried to fix it, so I'm not quite sure why it didn't transfer, but for the summer school classes, the total number of students was 313. So as you're looking up at the data, and if it doesn't match, it's because that number should be 313. So what I'll do is I'll go through some of the highlights that we added this year. We added Regents Review classes this year for students. So the students that would take those courses would be students who maybe passed the course, but not necessarily the Regents and needed some extra skill building. And it was also meant for students who maybe passed the Regents but wanted to get a better score next time around, so they could also work on their skill building as well. We offered it in every course except for chemistry, and students did pretty well on that. If you look at the data, overall in summer school, 54% of students who sat for the Regents were able to pass, so that's 54% more that didn't pass before. But when it came to the Regents Review courses, 66% of those students did make it through. So they did a pretty good job. Also, one of the exciting things that we did offer were the bridge courses this year. So this is a class for students entering, so they're building skills ahead of time. So for the Algebra 2 course, as well as Global 10, students who might need a little extra help or want to get a little extra academic assistance ahead of time. For Global 10, it was in class where they would come and meet. And for the Algebra 2 Bridge course, it was offered online. Students could go onto Google Classroom, practice their math skills, but they could also sign up for help sessions in summer school if they were struggling on their own. So it allowed them to be independent independent, learn at their own pace online, but receive teacher instruction if they needed it. And I did have a little bit of data
Can
for
I
you.
just stop you? on that
Yes,
just
absolutely.
that point? Is that group of students, do they apply, or are they nominated?
How do we identify the students then?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
This year, with it being the first year, counselors were talking to students, and some counselors were encouraging it, but we opened it up to anybody who wanted it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I can't say that I did that personally. Carrie Peverly reached out to those courses and sent SIS messages out so that parents were aware. And we offered 5 help sessions, and just so you know, the students that were taking advantage of it, the first session we had 12 students, and then it was 11, 11, 9, and 12. So we did have students who wanted that extra help and would come into summer school, meet with their teacher, and work on their online assignments as well. And so with that, I guess I would just open it up to any questions or just move on. Sorry.
Go ahead, President Dan.
And I will, yes.
One question for you, and I'm not being critical, I'm wondering, why not chemistry for the regions?
There were a few reasons for that. We posted internally and externally. We didn't get anybody for it.
Okay.
We didn't need it in the past, and what I did was I actually asked the school counselors and my secretaries to tell me if anybody asked for it, and nobody did. We did end up having a few students take the chemistry exam, but nobody that wanted the Regents review, so there were a few reasons for it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You had mentioned that like with Google Classroom there was different review problems that students could go to for Algebra 2, but maybe not, I'm not saying like this coming summer, so basically in sometime in the future, is it possible to have extra support online for a larger range of classes, not just like in the high school, but in middle school and lower
So
ranges?
let me address that in a broad sense, because it's very conceptual at this point. Probably at some point in November, either the first meeting in November or the second meeting of November, the board will see the budget assumptions and expectations. And one of the items that will be listed is academic skills development. Similar to last year, as a result of the conversation last year, we end up with the bridge courses. One of the things that we're working on now, and Dr. Wood is, and we're very much conceptual, is how do we try to provide additional skill supports to kids all year round without, and something that Mrs. Weber brought up a couple of years ago, without identification process. In other words, right now, many kids who receive additional support, they're identified either through the AIS process or special education process or acceleration process, some type of formal process. And so one of the things that we're trying to figure out is how do we do that more effectively. And one of the methods to do that is a better utilization, or should I say greater utilization of technology, what technology provides, particularly as teachers use more and more Google for Education have information already accessible, prepared to be able to do those kind of things and do some skill development. So it's not that far off, Sheridan. You're a junior this year?
Yes.
So you may very well be able to might be actually assisting with that, because one other component, I know the high school is doing a lot more of that, is actually relying on more peer tutoring and things of that nature. But we certainly want to do this across the board, to your point, not necessarily only secondary and not necessarily only kids who are failing, because something that we're realizing now is that we have kids who accelerate in courses, and very, very bright kids, and they're finding it challenging, in some cases for the first time, and some of them not necessarily dealing with the challenge very well, and start to doubt their academic ability. And one of the things that we want to say to a kid who is 9th grade algebra, who might be taking a 12th grade class, guess what, kid? You're so far ahead of the curve right now that the fact that you might think you're only doing C work, so to speak, you're so far ahead of the curve that we have to, how do we do that, and how do we then support that kid's skill? Because oftentimes we don't think about supporting that particular kid, just using the extreme skills. And so how do we do a better job from the A through Z when you think about kids on the various spectrums of performance, and how do we do a better job, particularly the kids in that middle ground of performance? And so that's one of the things that we're going to spend a lot of time over the course of the next several weeks. And so you hear the board's going to hear just a conceptual piece that we have to look to develop over the course of the spring and things of that nature. So that's where we're going here. So this is that start in that direction.
Because just my concern is, like Dr. Wood had mentioned, that they only meet 16 times during the summer, of the course of 2 months. So like if they're needing extra help and they only meet 16 times, that's, a big difference. And I know you were mentioning, accelerated kids. I know there's websites, Khan Academy, Purple Math, that a lot of students, even in the accelerated program, use on a regular basis.
So just going to quick little plug for something. I mentioned it to Dr. Wood. Today, Mrs. DeFisciani and I, we toured middle school 6th grade courses, looking at the one-on-one integration. I want to see it because I want to kind of see it for myself, what's happening. And the board approved, and we now have all 6th graders with Chromebooks. And it was pretty amazing to see how we've always said we want teachers to be more facilitators of learning, and we want kids to be more independent learners and not dependent learners. And we're seeing that now. Give a good example, math class. I happen to talk about math. The teacher's ability to be able to look and see not only who's actually working on problems, but who's actually getting the problems right, and be able to target her time to say, oh, I need to go to this kid because this kid either not doing anything because it's not showing up on her screen, or this kid is, bombing on the last 2 problems. So before the kid either get frustrated or give up, how does the teacher intervene? Because particular math is such a spiraling subject that we have to try to intervene, because if you spiral out of control either way, it's a problem. And so that's what technology does for everyday classroom. And what it's going to do is truly extend learning beyond the walls of the school district, not only during the school year, but also outside of the school year, where I know personally, because my daughter is living it now all summer, going to those websites because teachers assign, hey, if you guys want to get ahead, if you want to look at these kind of things, here's some website. So it really want to reinforce that independency piece of it. But we also recognize that some kids simply won't be as independent and as aggressive. And so we try to have these more structured opportunities to try to, urge them and support them as well. So truly, we're scratching the surface of potential of what can be in terms of really trying to wrap around students in a very comprehensive way.
I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm going to conjecture on some stuff, and it's probably much too much of a conjecture based on the little data that I have, but I ultimately have a question. Okay. I'm assuming that the grades, that is the cohorts, the numbers in each cohort is approximately the same. I know there are variations. But on the other hand, the number of people enrolled in the different cohorts are substantially different. 12th grade, they're trying to graduate. They didn't quite make it. Okay, that's off the table. 9th grade, first time most average students confront regions, big numbers. 10th grade, I would guess global studies is a big factor. 11th grade, you're talking about a heavy Regents load. But I'm really surprised that 11th grade isn't bigger than it actually is, and that the 10th grade is as big as high as it is. Can you get any explanation on that, or am I totally off base on this?
No, you're on the money. It really speaks to the level of rigor of the Regents exams. As you identified, the global exam is really one of the more challenging ones, as is chemistry. But typically when students enroll in chemistry, the vast majority are making it through the exam. The 11th grade Regents exams, English, it was the new Common Core Regents exam this year. I had trepidation. I've had trepidation for the last 3 years. Are we ready? Have we adjusted our instruction at the high school sufficiently to meet the needs of students as they encounter this more rigorous exam? Our students did beautifully on the exam. U.S. history has a higher pass rate than which is the 11th grade Regents relative to the global. So that really accounts for the difference in the numbers. It would be very nice to have a leveling out of the difficulty level of some of these exams, but this is what we get, and we see it year after year.
Are we still dealing with a one-year exam, 9th and 10th social studies, or have they segregated those yet?
2018, looking to sunset and have the Regents exam for 10 be the global just beyond 10th grade content, although the 9th grade would continue to be the foundation to support that 10th grade
That
course.
should help a lot.
Yes, it should.
So, Mr. Baber.
So I think I understood what you were saying in terms of offering more depth of services. More to come on that. My question is about who we're reaching, and do we have the capacity, or will we drill down further into the student population if we had more resources to offer them more English support, more language support? Do we have a factual or artificial cutoff for student participation right now, irregardless of the fact that they're invited, we're not requiring it, so I'm not accounting for that.
We had some interesting feedback, and I appreciate Megan. I'm pretty sure her last name is Mahalski. She is a global teacher who volunteered, accomplished teacher, volunteered to teach the bridge course for global this year. She did a survey, and I looked at the survey data. And not surprisingly, students entering 10th grade, when you ask them why they were sitting in the bridge course, they almost unilaterally selected because my mother told me I had to. They really seeking out on their own, not so much at that age level. So we need to continue to have that discussion internally about how can we make sure we're putting things out there, and how can we make sure we're involving parents in the decision, and even supporting the parents who do say you need to be there, so that those parents and those students don't feel like they're the only ones on the street that are having to go for additional supports. We do have a variety of offerings. There are very few times over the summer where we truly, absolutely max out our capacity, where if we had additional really pressing need, we wouldn't be able to operationalize or mobilize to get additional supports in place to provide for students. Our experience with bridge courses this summer gives us pause to think about, and to Sheridan's point, what are some additional options that we could be providing more upfront for folks, as particularly students completing, I'll say hypothetically, summer assignments in math? Are there some more upfront options we could provide with a drop-in? And that was one of the things that worked so well with Algebra 2. If they were going to do it online, the conversation was, that doesn't work for everybody, and what do you do when you hit that brick wall? So how can we offer some drop-in support that corresponds with that? So more thinking on that to come, and more feedback to collect, but early evidence is we meet the majority of the need that exists right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you. And next we have Michelle Mylod.
Good evening. So unlike the programs that you've heard about tonight, the special education program is not designed to further develop student skills, or provide remediation, or make up for content that is lost. The purpose of summer program for special education students is to prevent substantial regression. It's also for certain students who have very significant management needs and require 12-month programming to ensure consistency and structure. And it's also for our students who are in a more habilitative type program and receive primarily therapies to ensure that they are cared for during the entire school year. With that, Mr. Aaron Ricci was our principal this year. He was new to summer program, and I do hope that he's coming back. It's a 6-week-long summer program. We have we have a great opportunity. We carry over our community skills development program, which is what used to be called our Tallowood program, and that was great again this year, with those students coming down to the elementary school and actually engaging with those students in barbecues and ice cream socials and different events like that. Each class, each of the full-day classes, which are all the classes except for academic skills, that's a half-day class, but our full-day classes have one field trip a week, and our students have a really great experience. Okay. Oh, and this is Mr. John Conover.
How are we doing? I'm John Conover, Director for Shen Summer Adventures here, and every year this is my pleasure to come talk to you about all the great things, especially this year, because 2016 by far has been our most successful year ever. I mean, this is my 8th year as Shen Summer Adventure Coordinator for all of our programs, and as you can see, the total of over 1,400 students walking through those doors voluntarily this summer. We must be doing something right, and we've seen the smiles on the faces every day through all of our programs to prove it. And what does that do to? I mean, if you look at the wide variety of camps that we have, everything from enrichment camps to specialty music camps to acting camps to art camps. And we kind of just, RPI, Lego robotics camp, which is new this year, language camp, this is new this year. We keep expanding, and we keep surveying our kids, and we keep saying, what is it that you guys are interested in? What is it that you really want to do? What is it that, is your favorite part about the school year? And we can translate that data that we take from those kids into, let's create a new camp. Let's create a new workshop for that camp. Let's take art camp and not make it just drawing and painting, but let's make it clay and sculpture or puppet making or something like that, more specialized. And kids really, really enjoy that. And you can see from the numbers that, and I can tell you from just monitoring our online registration system, which is really working well for us, these are filling up faster and faster each year. It's becoming very competitive to get into these camps. And teachers and directors have even extended it, like let's add 20 more kids. That fills up within 2 hours. So we really seem to be doing something right. I think as we get more content specific throughout the years, and I think it's going to provide more interest for more directors to come on board to create new camps and just grow this even more. And I just making really, really, really happy every year when I see this grow and expand and see kids just happier and happier every year because we are allowed to offer so much. Dan?
Hey, John.
Yes.
So 544 in the C camp, and I know
Yes.
you're always, and I think the big draw on that is that middle school transition, as
Yes.
always. Is that the largest number you've had?
Yes.
Thus far? This is it?
Yes. I mean, that camp's been running since 2003, and we started with 8 workshops. There are 23 workshops in that camp right now that we've just kind of gone,
Yeah, you do a great job.
And we can see that we just keep expanding, and if I said 600, 650, I bet you they would fill up. I mean, it's just we get that many phone calls, throughout the year and everything. So we really try to keep a pulse of what the kids really want. And we just have so many dedicated professionals that are coming back every day to do those things, right up from all of our directors to all of our employees to even to the support staff, like Julie and Kim, doing the registrations, all the people in the finance and the payroll department. We all really work hard and a lot of planning from, December right on through that first day of June when everybody walks through the door. And we seem to be seeing why it's so beneficial. So, good question, yes.
Yeah, assuming the interest is there, what's your biggest challenge? Is it facilities or personnel to support the programs?
Not so much personnel. Facilities, because you only have one complex that has to be cleaned throughout the summer, and we have to figure out, what happens. I mean, we always work around it. We always make, sure our scheduling is good and stay very organized when it comes to those things. It's really just a matter of timing, and making sure that we're, have everything in order, and, as it keeps growing, making sure that we can facilitate those programs and support those programs with the supplies, getting things ordered on time, making sure that we're extremely organized about doing those things, in such a short window of time, and plus, because you don't know how many kids are going to sign up. I mean, you have last year's numbers, so you can see, what possibly could happen, but there might be a camp a year where something's down for some reason, and you kind of have to gauge, well, we're banking on this many kids coming in. We have to make sure that we're going to order. We have this short window of time to do that. So there's always some unknown variables in there, and we have to kind of use our best judgment to kind of stay on top of things and stay extremely organized so we can make sure that we are providing for those kids, And if we don't know if a workshop's going to run on the first day of camp, whether it's a C camp or whatever, we don't know, I know the musical theater camp is always a little, are we going to have the kids? We have to pay for the licensing. There's a lot of little things, that go into it, a lot of planning that goes into it that are uncertain variables. So that's our biggest worry. But other than that, we kind of just try to do our best to, focus on what we've done before and what's been successful in the past. So thank you so much. Oh,
John, just a quick
yeah,
question.
sure.
I can't recall, and last year might address this. For
Yes.
families that might not be able to afford, do we have scholarships available, whether through Shen Foundation, or is there scholarships available to families that might not be able to afford to participate, but the kids would get so much out of it?
In the past, we've had organizations donate money for scholarships and things like that. We did have a program last year through a company, Raymore and Flanagan, this was 2 years ago actually, that they came in and they awarded scholarships scholarships. And a lot of, because our directors are teachers and things like that, and if there's room and things like that, if there's a kid that is really needing to go or something like that, there's always, we always try to find a way, go to the student councils, go to, organizations that raise money and say, like, I said, there's a kid that really could benefit from the 6th grade transition program in one of our elementary schools. His counselor contacted me. Would the student council please do that? They voted unanimous. He was in. He got the support he needs. So there is a way to do that. So, but great question. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John. And while John presents it as a lot of fun for students, which it really is, an important takeaway from that is that's really important learning that goes on over the summer too. And the learning of our students and that development of the whole child really goes beyond simply kind of drilling that reading and math. Important, as are a lot of the other things that we're offering to children and families. Now we're moving on to what happens with adults in the summer. And there is a lot of professional development that occurs in the summer. And what I want to point out on this slide is we started, I'm going to say maybe it's been 5 or 6 years now, offering this Summer Academy for Educators. And I am really so impressed that 247 teachers participated in professional development over the summer, completely on their own time, completely unpaid. Some of those folks came for multiple courses. And, I think that really speaks to the commitment of a number of our teachers. And you'll see just a sampling of some of the courses that were offered. And we really do think about where are we going to get the most interest, what is of most value to teachers. And really, we have great participation from teachers offering to teach other teachers in the summer as well. We also do a lot of curriculum development work over the summer, reviewing student performance data, revising common assessments, and all in all, this work collectively prepares us to have a more successful start in September and really feel like we are prepared to offer the best that we can to our students in Shenendehowa.
Questions? Other further questions?
Thank you.
Next session.
Tuesday, November 8th, we're looking at an executive session. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well, we'll talk about it. It's kind of premature at this point.
All right, okay.
So that was all the presentations that we had for the board. Appreciate the questions. Always good feedback for us to take and see how we could enhance things as we move forward. So, and you'll see very consistent themes. We learned from the summer, we learned from the school year, and we use it as a part of our planning process ahead. So you'll probably hear some things like, oh yeah, I heard that before somewhere. Well, because it makes sense, because we want to make sure we build on our successes and learn from our failures. So thank you very much for your time and certainly for your support of these programs.
That's all for our 2 presentations. I think you already covered the school board recognition and the superintendent's comments, so can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Casey, Mrs. Rajat, all in favor? Meeting's adjourned. A couple of quick announcements. Other than Mrs. Blaber, the rest of the board plus Dr. Robinson and Dr. Wood will be at the NISBA event in Buffalo, 27th and 28th. And then our next meeting will be on Tuesday, 8 November. Right now, public session starts at 7. And then topics on that meeting, we're going to review 2017-2018 assumptions and expectations for the budget, as well as gearing up for lobbying. So that's what's on our docket for the next month. That's all. Thank you very much for attending.
Yes, sir.